Welcome to Forthright. I'm Sulani Madsen, and I'm bringing you a podcast on a topic affecting my community in a very personal way. Last week's column grew out of a whole lot of research into the industrial wind installations threatening my beloved dark skies on the ranch. Herewith is the column first published February 22nd, 2024 in the Spokesman Review, headlined, Lessons Not Learned Yet on Industrial Power Facility Siting. A century ago, in our drive for energy, we built what was called the eighth wonder of the world and harnessed the renewable power of water. It disrupted communities and transformed the landscape forever. Hard knocks lessons learned from the Columbia Basin Project apply to the current push to harness the wind. A wind farm is no more a farm than Grand Coulee Dam is a home for beavers. What developers are selling to landowners in Lincoln and Spokane counties are industrial energy production facilities. To farm is to cultivate the soil to produce food and fiber. Successful multi-generational farmers manage for the long-term sustainability of land and communities. Farms in eastern Washington provide habitat for wildlife as well as livestock and crops. The intermingled potholes and rangelands left by the Ice Age floods are a key part of the life cycle of multiple species of migratory birds using the strong prevailing winds as flyways. We can build a ladder around a dam and adjust water flows to reduce the hazards of slack water to migrating salmon, but not even Bruce Wayne could build a bat ladder around a massive spread of wind turbines. A greater hazard than simple impact with the blades is turbulence, creating pockets of lower pressure and leading to collapsed lungs and burst blood vessels, according to studies referenced in Scientific American in 2008. Bat Conservation International, founded in 1982, says, and I quote, collisions with wind energy turbines are one of the leading causes of bat mortality in North America and Europe. Fatality rates of bats at wind energy facilities have the potential to cause rapid declines in bat populations and increase the risk of extinction. End quote. A study published in Science magazine set the annual value of pest controlling bats to agriculture in Lincoln County alone at approximately $28.6 million. Killing birds and bats with turbine blades has cascading impacts on insect populations, including the pollinators necessary for healthy rangeland supporting wildlife. Building dams in the Columbia Basin has left us wrestling with the potential risk of extinction to migratory salmon and whole ecosystem impacts upstream. Planting wind turbines in the path of migratory bats and birds is no different, only now we can't say we didn't know any better. 3 companies are currently waiving the illusion of easy money in return for signing 30-year leases. Triple Oak Power held an initial meeting several months ago. Tenaska and Cordelio Power have just opened a joint project office in Davenport. They are not farmers, even if one guy wears a cowboy hat, and they're not fooling their new neighbors into thinking they have any real interest in the health of the local community. Calling them wind farms is a linguistic trick to make them sound benign. They are not. Wind turbines create noise, including imperceptibly low infrasound as vibration. An Australian study reports peer-reviewed research substantiates, quote, the potential for serious to moderate adverse health effects to individuals due to wind farm activity noise while living in their residences and while working on their farms near large-scale wind farms or large turbines, end quote. Tenaska's project manager reassured the audience at a community meeting in Reardon there'd be at least 1,200-foot setbacks. The Australian study recommends a minimum distance to the nearest residence for a typical 325 to 488-foot tall turbine as 6,500 feet. That's not reassuring. County commissioners have already been asked to deny permits. But local government is effectively cut out of the loop by the state's Energy Facility Site Evaluation Council. State Representative Mary Dye, Republican of Pomeroy, is as frustrated as county commissioners. Quote, powerful forces from the urban west side say they want to be green, push growth management plans, and then turn around and put industrial wind and solar in places growth management was supposed to protect, end quote. Hydroelectric dams received government subsidies for construction and operation, and in return still provide clean energy, flood control, irrigation, transportation routes for barges to reduce trucks on the road, active recreation areas for all, and access to water for DNR's Fireboss planes. Other trade-offs include salmon impact, which can be mitigated to some extent, and the loss of scenic and cultural values in places like Celilo Falls, never to be restored. Industrial wind installations mine government subsidies for construction and operation, provide intermittent energy without combustion, and have a theoretical net reduction in atmospheric carbon. That's it. Industrial wind facilities are a barrier to aerial firefighting. Other trade-offs include devalued human health, disrupted ecosystems, and the loss of the scenic and cultural values of dark skies. There's a reason power companies avoid nighttime photos of wind turbines. They're ugly. Di has watched the impact on her community in Garfield County. They provide an initial burst of new property taxes, but on a depreciation schedule that leaves essential services without support, Di said. They leave behind a permanently damaged landscape and divided communities. A century after embarking on one of the greatest landscape transformations in the history of the world, we have forgotten what a farm is, and we still haven't learned to touch the environment with humility. That column has received a lot of positive reviews. When I first saw the big wind turbines in Kittitas County as I was driving west on I-90 up the hill out of Vantage, they looked peaceful against a summer sky. Not too bad, while the fuss. And the photos always show a peaceful pastoral scene, usually with a bright blue sky and fluffy clouds. But the first time I saw them at night, a horizon filled with red blinking lights, blinking in unison, made my stomach churn. And I began to read more about the issues with impact on birds, bats, and humans. And I even researched competing studies on life cycle cost analysis. Whether they have a net zero impact or not on carbon depends on how narrowly you draw the boundaries of their impact and the assumptions made about maintenance required and recycling at the end of life. As far as I know, there's no proposals to recycle the giant concrete and steel bases that those turbines require that forever take that soil out of production. I even used life cycle analysis of wind energy as a research assignment for students, and of course I taught at WSU for 4 semesters called Introduction to the World of Design and Construction, just as a way to push students to think about the trade-offs that we make and how life cycle cost analysis is impacted by where you draw the boundaries. I read a lot about the state overruling local governments in other counties and pushing the approval of permits using the Energy Facility Site Evaluation Council, and I shook my head and went on with life. I didn't do anything. No one was proposing to put up wind farms near me, so it wasn't my problem. Until it was. A few days before we were set to leave on a week of vacation, we received a postcard announcing 4 meetings hosted by a pair of wind farm companies on very short notice. We were unable to attend any of them, but some of the neighbors were, and I got notes from them and from our local newspaper's coverage. There were a few at the first one and a growing crowd at the subsequent meetings. Before we even got home, there was a Facebook page started. Save the Lincoln County Skyline, Industrial Wind Truths in Education. Notice that it doesn't call them farms. And that was actually one thing my editor and I disagreed about, and it was whether they should be called farms or not in the column. She pointed out, and accurately I might add, that in common usage we've used the term farm to refer to many things that have nothing to do with growing food or fiber, and she suggested I should use wind farm to be sure my audience understood what I was referring to. She wasn't entirely wrong, but I declared that I was going to be stubborn on this point. It's industrial wind installations. A big part of the problem in our urban-rural divide is when real farming issues are made invisible to people with no connection to farming by language that is imprecise. There is a legal definition by the USDA of what a farm is, and it does not include an industrial wind facility. And installing one on a piece of property does change its zoning. It's now treated as industrial land instead of agricultural. I sent the column to a colleague in Seattle, an architect who is sure the world is going to end if we don't decarbonize the energy grid by 2030. As you can tell by the way I said that, I disagree, but it's not going to happen for a lot of logistical reasons, from raw materials to a lack of linemen who can expand the grid fast enough to keep up. But setting that aside, his first response to my request that he take a look at the column before he'd read it, he said, "Yes, there are definitely those who oppose renewable energy in some place, and for a wide variety of reasons, as well as many who support the economic benefits and purpose of renewable energy. and it's cheaper. Okay, sidebar, it's not. There'll be a link to that in on the Substack. As you know, there are fossil fuel interests that fund and stir up controversy in communities. Can you share some of the reasons people don't want renewable energy and some reasons why they do for journalistic balance? So here's the thing. I have looked at the benefits for using more renewable energy. Renewable energy isn't the issue. We're happy with hydro, that's renewable. There are no fossil fuel interests interested enough in Lincoln County to drive dissent. The objections rose organically from the grassroots. And to his credit, my colleague was open to a conversation, and after he had read the column, we talked on the phone while he was commuting home, and I explained that this isn't about not liking renewable energy. It's about not liking agricultural land converted to industrial use in a way that it cannot really be converted back in any realistic manner. And it's about not looking at ugly blinking lights in a countryside with beautiful dark skies. He told me confidently that wind turbines only take up an acre or so and they're working just fine in Iowa and they have a lot of agriculture there. And I rolled my eyes while he's on the phone and suggested that he simply Google Iowa wind turbines objections. If you look for and you ask what Ag thinks about wind turbines, farmers have been passing around accounts from other farmers of the problems caused by industrial wind turbine installation, operation, and maintenance. It's not like this wind turbine is just magically plants itself in the middle of a piece of farmland. It has a road, it has trenching that brings in wiring, it has all sorts of disturbance to that parcel that's being farmed. And even if it is still farmed, you now have to maneuver large equipment in our area. Just as in Iowa, we have very large equipment that we're using, combines, tractors, and they don't just make 90-degree corners around the edges of a wind farm. It adds cost to the production, it adds complication. The maintenance has the potential to be spilling fuels and toxic materials into the soil. It is not compatible. One irony in the timing of all this is I've been planning ways to launch a dark skies agritourism invitation at our ranch this summer. The night sky is full of stars and galaxies. It's truly awesome, and I want to share it. How can you understand the poetry of the Psalms describing God's handiwork in the heavens if you've never seen skies free of light pollution? For me, from my ranch, there's just this little smudge of Spokane off in the distance that I can cover with my thumb. But wind turbines really do affect he asked, do they really affect dark skies? He said it's just a few red lights. And yes, they do. A community in the province of Ontario actually got a large industrial wind project stopped because that community had spent 10 years developing dark skies tourism to benefit people from Toronto who have no idea what they are missing. And then I started to explain the issues with infrasonic sound. It's too low to be perceptible to the ear, but sending vibrations through the soil with documented negative health impacts on humans and animals. Think about that car you pull up next to at a stop sign that's got that bass going so loud that you can feel it. You can feel it physically in the next car over. Think of that. That's what we're talking about with infrasonic sound. So a pledge of a 1,200-foot buffer to the nearest residence, like to my house, isn't reassuring when there's respectable studies coming out of looking at existing turbine installations in Australia that recommend at least 6,500 feet. And for the taller ones, the ones like there are being proposed down around Kamiak Butte and Whitman County, it was 1.8 miles was the closest that any human should be for any length of time. And the impact on the soil itself is not to be ignored. Healthy soil, in rangeland especially, where it's pristine and where it's not been touched and turned, removes and cycles carbon from the air. But healthy soil is a complex ecosystem that we are only beginning to understand. We know more about the deep ocean, and we know very little about that. So my colleague had to go. It was time for him to get off the bus. We had to end the conversation. He did say that he'd learned a few things. And we agreed that this has the potential for even greater urban-rural divisions. We no longer have the same society as we did when whole communities and homesteads were asked to sacrifice for the good of the country and were drowned by the Columbia Basin Project. I suggested only a little bit snarkily that one way to address this call for sacrifice would be for Western Washington to go first. Put lines of floating wind turbines in Lake Washington or in Puget Sound next to Governor Inslee's house and see how that goes over. I've had to resist the urge to start a rumor that a wind project is planned in Lake Washington just to watch the uproar. So tempting. Links are included in the Substack post after the video link to the background research referenced in the article. Also posted is the chart I made as I was researching the benefits of renewable power, comparing hydroelectric to industrial wind. We could gain more renewable power at less cost to society and to the environment by investing in newer and more efficient turbines at the dams than planting big chunks of concrete into farmland and rangeland in Lincoln County. Lincoln County does have one very large surface watershed to Crab Creek, but below ground, unlike Spokane County's aquifer, which has a continuous ties all the way through, Lincoln County's aquifers, it turned out that the aquifer is more like, it was described by a hydrologist at a watershed meeting almost a decade ago as being more like an ice cube tray. We have a lot of little cereal aquifers that are connected in ways that we don't know and understand. There wasn't that much detail in the study. The scale of the concrete base for a single wind turbine is sufficient to impact wells in unpredictable ways, to block those connections, unless there's a lot of very intense and expensive study. So I'm thinking that needs to be in the scope of the EIS if it gets to that stage. We will persist in resisting, even in the face of the state government removing permit decisions from local authorities and transferring them to FSEC. Obviously, this is going to go on for some time. There's a whole lot of other issues that we haven't even come up yet. I'll be looking at the patterns of land ownership and how that affects the decisions to site wind turbines. Be sure to subscribe at Substack with or without a pledge for notifications of new content via email from the platform. You can take advantage of the opportunity to comment on this or on previous posts, or to email suggestions for new topics. And as always, remember those reference links for this column will be included after the video link in the Substack post. Thanks for listening.